Who's that?
The
TV? Or?
No, it's the dog.
Oh, okay, okay. But I'll ask you all just to kind of introduce yourself first, your first and last name, and however you want to be referred to.
I'm Melinda Ramirez. I'm married to Ramiro Ramirez.
I'm Ramiro Roberto Ramirez.
Ramiro's great-great-grandfather, Nathaniel Jackson, was a plantation owner in Alabama. And during the mid-1850s, he married a black woman, and they had children, and they decided that everything was getting a little bit too scary to stay there. And that was right after the Fugitive Slave Act was passed. And so they were feeling pressure with people being pressed back into slavery. So they decided that they would gather all of their kids and their families, got into 5 covered wagons, and brought 11 freed black men and their families with them, and they came to Texas.
While most people were going north, most of the slaves were escaping north, they decided to come south and just try to outwit the people that were trying to recapture the slaves. Their initial interest was to go into Mexico. And they were going to cross the river into Mexico. That was their first plan. So they arrived in the South Texas, and they decided to stay this side of the border for 2 reasons, really. One was they were Protestant, and most of the people in Mexico are not Protestant. And the second reason, language. They didn't know the Spanish language, so they decided to stay here. But they kept an open policy for any of the runaway slaves or the slaves that were freed. If they wanted to go into Mexico, they assured them that they could.
Yeah, Nathaniel Jackson apparently was a very sweet-spirited man, and didn't see any kind of cultural racial lines, and so that area became a really mixed raced community. His was not the only biracial relationship. There were other families that were biracial along the river. But one of their sons was Martin, who came down with them, and they congregated as a church with the families along the river. And in 1874, he donated 1/5 of an acre and to the Methodist Church for $1. And then he built a 1-room little church for everybody to gather. And then people in the family began being buried there. When Nathaniel, the patriarch, died, he was buried down the street on Eli Jackson's property, who was another son, Martin's brother. So,
and that is now the site of the Yahweh village encampment.
Their presence there is a protest to the wall. So, as long as we're still in the fight with that, then they'll stay.
Okay. And you had mentioned that I don't want to overlook this, that this site, this was an underground railroad location. Is it designated as a historic site, or?
It's historical with the county and the state, but it's not, the Underground Railroad just recently, there's a historian in Edinburgh at UTRGV who has been researching this and brought that to light to our family. We didn't even really know that. I mean, we knew that there were freed slaves that came in and all that stuff, but apparently she's really researched it, and there was a cotton trade that would come down, and so, and who was driving the wagons, but the slaves, and so they knew exactly how to get through the monte and the rattlesnakes and no water and all that stuff, and so it became that was the trail.
Yeah. And then in your fight to protect this land, so the current state, if you describe that to me, I mean, we were kind of talking, is that there was, the original proposal would have crossed the levee, certainly to take out portions of the church possibly, or the cemeteries. Can you describe the politics around the wall in that land?
You don't want to describe that.
The wall has been designed and has been already approved by the government that it will.
You gotta go out there. Wait a minute.
It will.
Start over.
Okay, sure. Good.
The proposed wall is designed at the present time and has been approved by the government to completely destroy one of the cemeteries, the Eli Cemetery, and come to the next cemetery, which is the Martin Jackson Ranch Chapel, and destroy that cemetery and part of the church. We went to Washington. We made 2 trips to Washington and met with the senators and representatives. Some were very friendly and receptive, and some were not.
Are you comfortable revealing?
Who was who?
Pelosi was exceptionally nice and gracious.
Schumer was.
Schumer was.
The Democratic ones were pretty receptive.
Yeah.
The other side was not very receptive, but
they listened.
They listened and took notes.
And I think after we gave them our story, their hearts were a little bit softened, and obviously they did talk to their senators about it, because they did put that language to protect historical cemeteries in the appropriations bill. So although they were kind of like at the beginning, they were more receptive by the end of our visit, which was encouraging.
So this is 2019, early 2019?
Actually, it was in November.
Okay.
At the end. It was right before they were all going to have to sign the bill.
The first trip was in September, and then we went again in November.
Okay. And so is that enough? If that is what's approved, are you comfortable?
We're safe for a year, and then when the appropriation bill comes up again, we may need to go back up there again. We don't know, but at least the language has been written that the historical places, cemeteries will be spared the wall, and so we feel comfortable that at least for 1 year we're okay.
And if I understand that, this doesn't prevent the wall from going a little farther north and potentially still not destroying the cemeteries, but walling you off like Lomita Chapel, or?
Basically, they're not going to bulldoze the grave sites, but they want the wall.
Yeah.
So we're not sure if they're going to build it farther north and will still be blocked, or if we're 99% sure they're not going to build it further south because of the treaty with Mexico. But our hope is that they just leave that little section open with no wall.
Yeah. And you had have a lawsuit out as well.
Our attorneys have a lawsuit against President Trump, and for right now we're safe. He actually signed the bill where we were going to be okay at least till the next appropriation bill.
But we're suing Trump, a group of us, private landowners, nonprofit organizations, and
What are some of the names of your partners? You mentioned Earthworks or Earth Justice?
Earth Justice is the firm that's helping us.
So it's a variety of concerns, obviously, and some environmental concerns.
Yes, environmental concerns for the river, especially in Laredo, and then environmental things for the landowners that their ranches are being cut into, and so we've sued President Trump for using monies that have not been earmarked for the wall. He got money for the wall, but he's taking more, and that's what we're suing him about.
Okay, that's pending.
And that's pending.
Okay. Right. And that is that. I mean,
the judge. It's in federal court, and the judge who is a Trump appointee is the judge.
Yeah.
So, but he's looking at all of our concerns and hasn't ruled on anything yet.
Now I know that the kind of immediate fear has been, destroying the cemeteries, destroying this historic site, the church. But there's obviously, like within this lawsuit, other concerns around the wall generally. Can y'all describe, what you may have concerns over, and also we talked about how the land is also changing, that a wall would create an added level of hardship, maybe the environment or forced migration with climate change. Can you describe other concerns?
Well, in the area that we are, it's about 3/4 of a mile north of the actual water, and it's open with brush and a lot of farming down there, and there are a lot of families that live down there, and so environmentally it's gonna cause more flooding than it already is prone to have. It's gonna cause animal migration. It's gonna disrupt that.
It's very much so. The animals that go back and forth to the river to drink of water, and then they come back. What animals migrate back and forth, that's going to stop that, and no telling how that's going to affect the environment and the people living in that area. So there definitely will be climate change, and there's change on the whole land structure.
But besides that, I mean, that's the physical things that are going on. But the emotional concerns for all of the people that are going to be in no man's land, or their houses completely destroyed, and they never get compensated. I mean, people from when Bush was building a wall, people still have not been compensated for what was built on their property. So it's just the emotional turmoil. And then you add on that all of the people that are trying to get here. It's ironic that our little place was a pathway into freedom to Mexico for people that were being oppressed. And now it's a pathway for people from the South that are oppressed economically, whichever way, are coming north into freedom. And we still haven't learned that we need to be compassionate for the people that are desperate. And so, you look at the billions of dollars that people want to spend on an archaic type of preventative measure. and think, okay, if we took that money and helped process people quicker, give them adequate lodging while they're waiting for that processing. I mean, we could hire a ton of people with billions of dollars and give,
And not separate families.
and not separate families, not be cold-hearted to mothers that have walked 2,000 miles with their babies in their arms and then separate them. I mean, it just...
These people are desperate, and they're looking for help. And we historically have been a very compassionate country. Historically, we've helped the poor, the sick, the orphans, the innocent ones, and we don't want that to come to a stop. A question that I have for the people that are for this fence, or the people in Washington, is how are they going to face their maker when they have to explain why they destroyed 2 sacred cemeteries, a sacred church? How are they going to explain that? You know, what are they going to tell their maker that they took part in that? I'd like to know that.
I have read recently something that was posted on the internet, and it made me really think. It was talking about how people are so against immigration, and they're the very people paying $120 to you know, Ancestry.com or whatever to find out where their families had immigrated from. It's just like, you know, would you have appreciated if your great-great-grandfather were stuck under a bridge and not allowed in? No, you wouldn't. So it's just, I don't know, it's just, we've skewed our values as a people here in the United States.
I know, I'll wrap up, but we were talking earlier just about how people in this area have been experiencing climate change, that it's been hotter or drier, and I'm sure that doesn't stop at the political boundary or the river. I mean,
Right.
It's for the region. What has it been like this last 10 or 20 years?
The summers are longer, they're hotter. We have degrees of 100, 115, 110, 115. We're never seen before. This winter, we had a cold front. This is February, almost the end of February. We've had our first cold front a couple of days ago. It got down to 50.
And no rain.
52, and there hasn't been any rain in months.
Yeah. So obviously I guess what I'm getting at is that's going to impact people who are suffering or are doing these trips, trying to find asylum. That's
the farmers and the ranchers in deep South America, then Central America, they're not. They can't farm anymore. They depend a lot on rain. They depend a lot on the climate. Well, they're moving into the cities, and now there's gang violence and all kinds of problems because of the climate change.
Yeah, and end up here in camps or pushed back or separated from their families.
That's right.
Yeah, and certainly my fear is that continues and grows, as the heat rises and droughts.
People are not going to stop coming here.
Yeah.
So we've got to figure out a good way, a long-term way to address those needs in a compassionate way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
These
spend
are people,
our dollars wisely so that we can really affect change instead of just being, we don't want you here and you can't come in.
if you look at the bigger picture, these are people like we are. the feelings and emotions and fears and anxieties, it's just like we are. And we're closing the doors to them and treating them as if no account, that they don't matter. They do matter. They matter to us, they matter to a lot of people in this country, and they matter in the eyes of God.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the things that the narrative about down here, first of all, there's no climate problem, is being talked about a lot, and that all of the people that are coming over are dangerous and, you know, hardened criminals. And that's just not the case. But the rest of the country, they just hear what they hear on TV or what they read in the papers. And actually, it's just the vast majority of people are coming over who are seeking a better life for themselves and their children. They're desperate. They're not here to take advantage of anything. They're here to help with the society, but to get help also through work. So I don't know. It's like such a huge problem that it's going to take a long time to chip away, but it's with us. I mean, when he was a young boy here, his father was a farmer, and that's back in the day when there were small farmers, and they had that bracero program. Why can't we do something like that again, where you let them come over and work, and then they take their money back and wait until the next harvest? You know, we can come up with different things than the wall. That's going to cause a lot of damage to our environment, our climate,
society, not only psychologically but sociology. You know, it's going to change.
Anything we haven't talked about that's top of mind, or that you want people to understand?
Just that it's
been a long
it's a concern for everyone, and I just think that the message isn't getting out there that the people that are seeking asylum here truly need asylum. They're not coming over here just because, you know, they're mean people and they want to get into the drug trade. So I think that if we could just educate people more through facts rather than fear, then I think the thinking would change, and we could come up with better solutions. So.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much for your
welcome.
time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.